Hey, we're going to make a short video. I'm making this one from home tonight about the First Amendment, which is the probably one of the most important amendments when we talk about the Bill of Rights. But to do that, we're going to have to get started with a few things. We're going to put this graphic organizer together in a way that makes sense and it's easy to follow, and it's also making good use of paper. So we're going to go through this kind of quickly, but stop the video as you need to. And as I start to put this whole graphic organizer together, I'm going to leave a lot of blank spaces in there. I'm really just setting up the graphic organizer for you. And you're going to be able to take that organizer and you're going to have to build it and add some information as it relates to your knowledge and how you think things are important in terms of each of the rights we're going to talk about. So let's start with this. We're going to take our paper and we're going to fold that paper in half just like hamburger style. Okay? And then when I fold that, I'm going to take the crease, which is right here. See that? I'm going to fold it halfway. Just halfway. And then I'm going to open it up. Now, once I open it up, if I were to go all the way open, you're going to see it open like that. But I don't want to do that yet. I'm going to start like this. And now I'm going to go back up here and I'm going to fold it again. Why? Because that is how we do it. And then we're going to fold it halfway down. And then I'm going to roll it over one more time. See that? Get that perfect? Okay, I'm going to open it up. All the way open. And they got lots and lots and lots of squares. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take this very top line. And we're going to run this line all the way across. Now I'm kind of doing it perfect, or kind of quickly. You don't have to do it perfect, but obviously the better you do, the happier you're going to be with your final result. And I'm going to go to this first crease down, but I'm going to skip this first part because that's where my title goes. I'm going to run this straight down. Like that. I'm going to skip the center line. I'm going to come over here. Now, if you can't tell, I've got this paper broken into thirds. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to fill in these spaces. You know, like I said, I'm doing this kind of quickly. And if you can't keep up this perfectly okay, just stop the video and slow down until you're caught up. But you're going to see a graphic organizer that looks kind of like this. Okay. So up here, we're going to go ahead and title this thing. And I'm going to title this Bill of Rights. Now that's an important term. And because it's an important term that I'm guaranteed to have to know later on, especially in my classroom, I'm going to put it in a Kapow box. I'm going to give it some yellow. Now, if you don't have yellow, just be consistent with the same color. Orange is probably the next closest thing you're going to get, and it's perfectly acceptable. But, like I said, you want to make sure you don't lose focus on what's important, which is the term Bill of Rights. And the Bill of Rights is actually the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. And we're going to specifically talk about the First Amendment. Now, in case you don't know what an amendment is, an amendment is a change to the Constitution. Okay, so we got that. And I'm adding a little green because I want to make sure I make this connection. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to start with this. Right here, we're going to label this visual. Over here, we're going to put the term. And over here, I'm going to go right into the box. I'm going to write, why is it important to me? So once again, I'm going to write this out. Why is this important to me? So each one of these terms, you should be able to answer this question. And this is where we're going to end it. So when we create these terms, we list them here. This is your chance to reflect on these terms, okay? So the very first item, and once again, we talked about the First Amendment. The First Amendment has 5 different parts to it. Really, really important parts. The first one is freedom of speech. All right. And I'm going to go ahead and put that in a little kapow box because I know that that is a key term that I have to know. If somebody were to ask you what the 5 freedoms are in the First Amendment, the first thing that come out of your mouth, ironically, should be speech. And this means we can say what we want, we can say what we believe, we have certain rights and we have certain opportunities to express ourselves, whether it be through our music, our clothing, the way we wear our hair, but most importantly, the words that we say, okay? Freedom of speech. Next freedom. Now, I wonder if I spelled that wrong. It should be like this. I don't know, Google it. All right, let's go over here. I know what it is, but I can't always spell. Freedom of religion. Now this gives us the right to worship who we want, when we want, and we don't have to worry about our government limiting or restricting that. Now there are exceptions to every single rule, just like with speech, we have exceptions to religion, but we'll talk about that shortly, okay? The next one is freedom of the press. And in case you didn't know, we're talking about the newspapers. We're talking about news anchors. We're talking about the internet that tells us things that academically are accurate, that could keep us attuned to what's going on in the world. Next one, it's called the right to assemble. That means you can get together. You can have meetings. You can protest, which is really tied to that freedom of speech concept. And if you haven't been able to figure it out, there's a real connection to some of these rights, actually all these rights, to what was going on early on with our American Revolution and some of the reasons why we actually broke up with England. And the last one is right to address grievances. Now, a lot of you probably won't understand that because you don't use the word grievance very often, but I'm going to put another word, and I'm going to put it in parentheses, not parentheses, but into a kapow box, because essentially this is really what it is. It's the right to complain. Okay? And so your government has to be able to, well, I shouldn't say they have to be able to, but you have a right to reach out to your government and complain about issues, problems, things like that. And to be honest with you, they have to respond to you. Now, obviously, there's exceptions to that. You can't call somebody, a congressman, at 3 o'clock in the morning, expect them to call you back in the next 15 minutes. But you still have rights to be able to access your government, whether it be local, state, or federal. Okay? So let's go back to the beginning. Freedom of speech. We know freedom of speech is the idea of expressing your ideas, and the government can abridge that. But there are exceptions. There's lots of exceptions, actually. You can't start a panic. You can't lie. It's called libel or slander. You can't defame other people's character. That means you can't just say bad things and ruin their reputation without getting sued. Um, there are restrictions. You can't try to promote a revolt of your country. There are restrictions to this. Now, instead of focusing on that, though, I want you to think about what we said the freedoms actually were. So we know freedoms in speech are the things you can do. So over here as a visual, I want you to think about pictures of what that might look like. And, an easy picture I might think of would be like a note, because music is part of that expression. I might look at somebody with hair that looks different than mine. And when I say different, I mean everybody's hair is different because I don't have much hair. Or maybe it's some person just standing here on a megaphone, screaming out. Okay. These are all examples of free speech. Now, what I'd ask you to do is come over here and explain why it's important to you. So whatever you're doing, however you're doing it, pause for a second, and I want you to talk about and think about why this is important to you. And hopefully you pause. I'm going to keep moving because that's my pause. Okay, let's go to freedom of speech or freedom of religion. This is how you worship, whether you believe in God, whether you don't believe in God. Maybe this has to do with the church. Maybe you don't go to a church. Maybe you go to a synagogue. Or maybe you go to a mosque. It doesn't matter what you go to. You get to choose what you want to believe in. And if your version of God is different than somebody else's, or maybe you have no version of God, maybe you're an atheist, you have a right to have those beliefs, and the government cannot force you to have any one particular religion. And that's why a lot of times in schools, teachers are very restricted on how we talk about religion, because we can't preach religion, because your teachers in public schools are public employees, which means we represent the government. Okay? Now, there are exceptions to this. Okay? You cannot use your beliefs to hurt others. It's that simple. Just like freedom of speech, you can't use to hurt other people. Okay? So once again, just like we talked about this, take a minute and reflect on that. Okay? My pause is up. Hopefully your pause is not done because you stopped the recording, taking time to think about that a little bit. Okay, freedom of the press. Now, if you don't know what the freedom of the press is, think about newspapers. I always draw this, but these are old times. People sent out papers like that with the news on it. Maybe you watch your news on the TV, that newfangled thing that people watch sometimes. Or maybe you're one of those young, hip lads that like to get their news from that crazy thing called a Google machine. I don't know. It's up to you. It's sky's the limit. Wherever you get news, that's up to you. But it has to be academic valued, okay? You cannot just make up stories that have no value. Now, once again, take time to think about what's important, because remember, if you don't understand why it's important, think about it. The government controlled the news, and the government told you what to think all the time. If you never question your government, if you never heard a different story than your government, what would that do to you? Okay. Now, the right to assemble. A little short guy in there. Is just as important as the rest of them. You can pick it, you can complain, you can do whatever you, but the fact is you have the right to join together. Black Lives Matter, all these great opportunities people had to speak their mind and protest the government or try to affect change. That's what happens when you assemble. Okay, the last one I'm going to talk about, and hopefully you took time to reflect on this for a minute here, okay? The last one I'm going to talk about is the right to complain. Now, what does that look like? I don't know. Whenever I complain, I get on the phone usually, and I complain to people all the time.
I'll see you tomorrow.
And that's a little closer to my hair look right there. But when you complain, you're venting to your government. And think back to the original complainers, our First Continental Congress, the Olive Branch petition, how it was ignored. Well, they want to make sure there's an avenue or an opportunity for people to speak out and reach out to their government. Okay? Think if that didn't exist, what would that look like? How would that affect you? And that's something else you should list over here. Now, I gave you lots and lots of things here to think about, and I did it really fast. But I want you to take a few minutes to reflect on these things. You can do this alone. You can do this with your teacher. You can do this with a friend. Whatever setup you are working with, obviously, you make it happen. But I want you to go ahead and I want you to list some exceptions. I want you to list other scenarios where these might exist. And I want you to go ahead and tell me each one of these why it's important to you that this right still exists. And while you're at it, maybe, just maybe, you want to add a little color to some of this, because these look pretty boring to me. Okay? Anyway, you handle it how you want. But that is your really, really, really short, down and dirty video about the First Amendment. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of press, right to assemble, and the right to complain. Those are the rights that you have to remember if you're going to understand that right. And each of these are just as important now as they were back then. But unless you take a minute to reflect on why they're important, then you'll never truly understand why it's something we still need to fight and protect today. That's it. That's my short little speech. And good luck to you from there. Thank you.